welcome. You're watching Medically Speaking. My name is Meenakshi Uprethi. This week, in the coming week, we'll be talking about a certain issue which is very close to my heart and to the heart of every medical professional. Yes, we'll be talking about violence against doctors. Why at this time, when everyone's talking about COVID, you ask, we are going to be talking about violence against doctors because they will be treating us when the inevitable third wave comes. We celebrated India's Independence Day recently, but are the doctors truly free from violence? Something which we had seen, of course, prevalent and extremely unfortunately happening even during the peak of the second wave. Let's talk to medical professionals about the same and get opinions on the same topic and also suggestions on how we can improve the current scenario. And for the same, I have a panel of experts, starting with Dr. Chakra Rao, President, IRC. I also have Dr. Sushil Agrawal. He's an associate professor at the BHU. I also have Dr. Sushil Mandania. He is an oncologist. Dr. Sandeep Mishra, professor cardiology from AIIMS. I have Dr. Yatan, and he is an additional professor, psychiatry department of the elite AIIMS Institute. Now, I'm going to start with Dr. Sushil Agrawal first. So first of all, welcome for joining us on NewsX, and thank you for talking to us. My first question, doctor, is that when we speak about freedom from violence against doctors, we've seen this vicious cycle. We would see reports of patients attacking doctors, agitated patients, understandably so. But at the same time, there is a huge gap between patients' expectations and what really, with the given limited resources, you all can deliver. How do you plan to really bridge that gap when this so-called inevitable third or even when later, who knows, the fourth wave comes in, sir?
See, the preparations are already under the third wave. As expected, many experts say that the third wave is mainly going to affect the children. So in our hospital also, we have made one pediatric ICU especially for the children of around 100 bedded hospital, and we have also prepared another COVID ward for other general patients who will come in the third wave. But still, if the third wave comes like second wave, then it will be very difficult for us to manage so many patients coming at once for us. So at that time, the patient expectation becomes very high, and we are unable to deliver those expectations because of the limited resources. Right. So that leads to the violence against doctors, and I think patients should also understand the limited resources in our country and the huge population which we have to cater with those limited resources. So it is the responsibility of both government as well as patients, and to understand that within the limited resources, the doctors are doing their duty out of power to deliver them the best possible treatment they can deliver.
Well, absolutely. So you say it's a two-way road. I think it's a three-way road. The responsibility really lies with the government, with the patients, and slightly so with the doctors also. And I'm not criticizing you all at all. We salute our saviors. We've done that in the past as well. But I just want to broaden the horizon of the conversation. And I'd like to bring in Dr. Yatin in the conversation. So since you're from the psychiatry department, when we really talk about the language, which doctors use, Dr. Yatan, even a little word can be of great significance. Do you think at the time of the MBBS curriculum itself, maybe the language which used at a sensitive time for patients at any cost, I'm not saying that violence is justified, but could really even some doctors modify the language, increase sensitivity when they convey extremely sometimes heartbreaking information to the patient's families?
I would put it this way. You are very right in saying that if there is a problem, the solution has to come from all possible angles. There is no denying that fact. But as Dr. Sushil was mentioning, we need to acknowledge that there is this overburdened health system that we are dealing with, especially in the public sector in our country. But that's not an excuse that I'm citing. I'm just giving you a reason that probably contributes to the situation. Second, as you rightly mentioned, the expectation. But again, I won't say that patients and their attendants should not have expectations. Ours is probably one of the best healthcare delivery in terms of the quality of clinical services that patient can avail in our country. So that expectation has to be there. I would bring in a word communication here. So in my opinion, one of the biggest contributors to that situation that we see as the violence against doctors and other healthcare workers, it is driven by that communication, or more precisely a lack of communication, and at times miscommunication. So what happens is, you need to understand the relatives of the patient, they are stressed. Their loved one or their relative is receiving the medical care. They are not sure what's happening. That uncertainty is there. Yes, I do acknowledge if the right words are used to communicate the right information, it goes a long way. I would mention here that recently there has been a change in the curriculum. There has been a growing focus on having these sessions and lectures and even practical orientation classes on communication skills for medical graduates. As you rightly mentioned, it needs to be strengthened upon. That's one area where we need to invest more. Um, Communicating what the situation is, communicating what
Yes,
is expected,
absolutely, sir.
communicating
Even
when
each
the
and every word exceptionally important. But I think you very rightly brought in the point of various parties, and nobody can be absolved of any responsibility. And certainly those who propagate violence, they cannot be absolved of responsibility. Dr. Chakra Rao, we had earlier discussed how grim the situation is when it comes to giving basic resuscitation to patients, who are almost at the verge of losing their life. When you speak to any cardiologist, everyone knows that 80%, as you had also mentioned earlier, deaths can be saved if initial resuscitation is given. You're giving so many online courses, but there is a public apathy. When there is a road accident, none of us really step in and take the patient at the right time to the hospital. How can people also, despite of, yes, the agonizing situation, sympathies with them, but how can they be absolved of any responsibility when it really comes to violence against doctors?
When it comes to resuscitation, actually, uh, in the hospital, actually in the emergency room or in the ICU or in the operation theater, it should be a teamwork. When somebody is doing the resuscitation, chest compression, or administering the drugs, another a skillful person who can deliver these good words has to talk to the patient relatives and explain them neatly. As my earlier speaker said, nowadays the NMC has included a part of the communication skills in the curriculum, but previously it was not there. Even then, these are the three places where there is a problem. And another thing is the patient relative is very much disgusted. He has a lot of agony, and we have to express some sympathy and empathy for him. Not only that, we do not have a system of insurance, and there will be a lot of monetary burden also on the patient relative. He will be subjected to a lot of strain. So all these things will be there. So, but the resuscitation, of course, resuscitation will be going on. It will be a teamwork, and that team will be going on doing their own work, and the one person has to be
Sir, I
communicating.
actually spoke about resuscitation because I also wanted to highlight public apathy. Yes, sympathies with the public, but then at the same time, we don't take much responsibility. We are people who like to point fingers. But, sir, I think you've raised a very, very important point about the monetary burden on people. Dr. Sushil, when we speak of law and order, and we all agree it should be maintained, nobody can take law in their hands, but certainly, appointing marshals in hospitals, Dr. Mishra, forever, having policemen, guard hospital rooms forever cannot be the solution, sir.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. And let me say state couple of things, and then I will probably talk about bit of solution.
So I think one is that we were discussing that, initially we had a socialistic model of healthcare. But I think since West moved into capitalistic model and so many other countries, we have also kind of switched over to the capitalistic model where, in the capitalistic model, profit is everything. So if we submit our healthcare and as well as education, because that the same thing is happening with education as
Yes.
well, to the capitalistic model, then naturally, the people who are in the fray will come in because they want to make profit. And so we ourselves have put it in this that it is no longer a kind of social service, but it is a profit making venture, many of the corporate hospitals. So that is why this problem comes in. So that is number one. Number two is that I think the basic issue is that there is a distrust or a mistrust between the patients and the doctors. And I think the reason for that is, one of them is that, now patients start thinking that doctors have also become profit making, and therefore they are making some profit out of their illness, which is totally unacceptable to them. And, because that has been our culture for long. So I think that mistrust is there, but that is only part of the reason. The more important part is that there is this lack of communication, because many of the doctors still, join medicine because they want to serve the society. But while they are trained in their profession very well, they are not trained in the communication part. And therefore, because they lack these communication skills, many a times they are unable to get their point over to the patients. And because they are unable to get to the patients are already thinking that, doctor is kind of fleecing me or something like that, because that's already in the mind because of the, that is how the society works. And on the top of that, if the things are not properly communicated, then it creates a real mess. So I think that is the second point. The third point is that, while we are resource limited, while we are financially, constrained, but we need to organize our services better. So maybe you have a lot of patients, for example, in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, what it was meant for, say, let us say 20, 30 years back, now we have maybe 100 times more load on it compared to what it was made for. But I think the best way out of this is that if we can organize according to the load as well as the facilities that are available. So it requires a bit of management skill as well, not only communication skill, but management skill as well. And that part, I think, if we go to the curriculum part, I think, as Dr. Yatin said, that, we need to incorporate communication skills in the curriculum, but I think we need to incorporate the management skills as well. And the third important thing I think that we need to make a change in curriculum is, we need to get these doctors to become more empathetic. And maybe what we need is a transformational medicine where we look at case reports. I just give you a point. There was one movie and there was this, pictures of, some mass barbaric acts that were done. And that book was brought out. And once that book was brought out with all those suffering, lot of people got empathetic, and then there was this real change, and then genocide, etc., was banned.
I got your point, sir. And even when I was talking about the idea of profiteering, I was talking about the mistress amongst people. And also there were reports of some hospitals charging 4 to 5 lakhs per day for a single bed during the peak of COVID crisis. But taking this, your thought forward, Dr. Yatin, would you like something to add to this conversation, considering earlier you made this point about curriculum, and now it's getting widened, and perhaps we are speaking of not just communication but also management. Is that something which you think could bridge this mistrust and really end this cycle of violence?
Healthcare providers is not going to serve any purpose, and that's really unacceptable forward and won't improve anything. So that's the basic thing that we need to understand, all of us. In fact, I'm not speaking as a healthcare provider, I'm speaking as a general citizen. Second is that, yes, patients have rights, there is no denying, but we need to understand the constraint in which the healthcare infrastructure and the systems are functioning. So we need to find that right way forward, where even the relatives know that yes, this is what we expect, but then they need to know their responsibilities as well. The healthcare providers need to have those resources at their disposal where they can spare that time from the clinical care and they can sit down and talk to their relatives. So we need to have that overall system in place where relatives know what they are going to get. The healthcare providers
Transparency.
know
So
what
transparency is paramount. Dr. Agarwal, do come in this conversation. There are two Dr. Sushils, and I think that's why there was a bit of a confusion which Dr. Sushil I was referring to. So I'm going to use your second name so that. So Dr. Agarwal, please come into the conversation. Transparency, need of the hour, sir. Would you agree?
I agree. And there is one more point. We cannot treat every patient in a tertiary care hospital. So we need to strengthen our district hospitals. That is very, very important. If we want to lessen the burden on our tertiary hospitals, if we only tertiary hospital, then this scenario won't change. So we have to improve we have to improve our district hospitals so that most of the patients can be tackled there only. So only the serious patients and the patients who have severe type of disease which
But
cannot
sir,
be
as of
dealt
now,
at
our
a district
government also is
hospital
very
can-
focused on tertiary care. Even look at Ayushman Bharat, with all due respect, it's a great scheme. But end of the day, we are channeling more money in the tertiary care only.
See, the problem in the tertiary hospitals, instead of dealing tertiary patients, we are
Yes.
actually dealing most of the
OPD
general
double.
patients because of the referral from the district hospitals, and we are overburdened because of that only. If we are only left with the complicated patients only, so
Okay.
then we will be able to serve them better if we strengthen our district hospital. So this is my point of view. If we strengthen our district hospitals, we can lessen the burden on our tertiary care hospitals.
Right. Dr. Chakra Rao, when we speak of, an overall attitude change, sir, how do we change the attitude of people as well? Because end of the day, there are people who are exceptionally, unfortunately, rowdy as well. We've seen not just incidents of doctors getting assaulted, but vandalism in the hospital. Certainly, that's not acceptable. You can't have perpetual policing in hospitals. How do you change this mentality, sir?
Is of course, one day we cannot change the mentality. Actually, what we need is the trust between the patient, relative, and the doctor. So for the trust to have, we need some acquaintance. A family doctor process that was existing about 30 years back, it should be there. In those days, there was no problems or quarrels or vandalisms or anything is not there. Now this has become the patient is going to an unknown doctor and they will not be having anything, and this patient relative has got a lot of hope on even the old or the young sick patient, and he will be coming, and he do not know the consequences or the problem of the disease. What he want is his son or his father has to be live. So these are the issues. So in these circumstances, actually, whatever the place we are working, we should be little careful in extending apathy and sympathy towards them, and definitely the communication skill will definitely improve. Whatever the equipment we have, whatever the big hospital will be having, definitely there will be window crashings and all those things. And we have seen even the doctors losing their eyeballs and being beaten up, all those
And
things
that's
are there.
totally unacceptable, sir. It totally is unacceptable.
It is totally unacceptable, and it is the spurt of their agony that is coming out like this. And we should be very careful in dealing with these people, that we should not get into that type of a situation, and we have to take care from
All
the
right, got
beginning.
your point, sir.
This is
Let me bring other panelists also to take this forward. Dr. Mandhania, what would you say? Any changes you'd suggest perhaps even the private sector could think of?
See, the most important thing is there has to be a very strict message to the society. If you are vandalizing this or if you are going with the violence, you will not go scot-free. There is no need of new laws. Laws are there. If you talk about the Maharashtra Medical Protection Act, Every state has got its different acts. And in this pandemic, we had a modification of this act, and there is act where the people need to prove themselves if they are not been guilty. So this has to be implemented. First thing. Second thing is that the message should go very strongly outside. You cannot go away with this. Thirdly, if in the part of our side, yes, there is a definitely we should be having a more communicative, and there should be more transparency. Yes, that is what the key. And the less in the government setup, I think the structurally the thing should improve in the form of infrastructure, in the form of medication, and the poor people should get some justice, because where they should go, they cannot afford private thing, and automatically the things goes in hand out of hand when they go to private hospital, because they are not being given justice in the government hospital. So why we should not strengthen our government setup? Why we should not invest in our government setup? Why these poor people should not get justice in the government
message
setup?
to vigilantes is your message. Point taken, sir. Dr. Mishra, do come in here, sir. When we are speaking of a holistic change, sir, because we are reaching the end of our discussion, and the idea was not to implicate anyone. The idea was to think of a positive way forward. What would you suggest, sir? How do you suggest this vicious cycle of violence ends, sir?
I think we have to work at three levels. Number one is the physician level. Number two is the hospital level. And number three is the community on the whole level. So coming to the physician level, I think three things are important. Number one, and I think most important, is the ability to communicate. So maybe doctors should be taught how to communicate. They by themselves can also learn how to communicate, especially, considering that when the patient comes, he's already sick, and the relatives are also already very distressed. And to this distressed people, if they feel that they are having more problems and more difficulties, then they react in that way. So the communication part will take away of these problems. Second important thing is that we have to improve our structure, and we should be more organized, so that once the patients come in, they know that, okay, this is the path we are going to follow. This is our disease. This is the prognosis of disease. This is the natural history of disease. These are the kind of options we have for treatment, and this is the expected outcome. So they should know all these things in correct detail. And the third thing is that doctor should convey these things in a manner not like an ordinary business person, but in an empathetic manner, so that the patient is at least relieved. The second thing about the coming to the hospitals, what they need to do is they need to get better organized. They need to have more security apparatus and organized security apparatus. They should form a committee where if some violence is anticipated or happens, then that comes into action and takes charge of everything. And finally, I think they can have posters in the hospital saying that, okay, beating a doctor or violence against a doctor is an offense which can be punished. Coming to the society level, I would say that laws are there, but they need to be enforced. And the society should know that, okay, if these laws are there and if they do cross the limit, they will definitely face consequences. Right. So that assurity should be there.
Dr. Yatan, please come in here. Cogent, coherent and transparent communication coupled with this is unacceptable. Do you think that could really be the solution to this problem?
Yes, we can't have a very simple, straightforward answer to this question. The stakeholders, they have a role to play. It cannot be a one-sided or a two-sided affair. Everybody has to play their part. But we need to remember, it's a change that's going to take some time. And while that change is happening, we need to realize that right from today itself, we need to put a halt to this violence, because it's not going to take us anywhere. That's not the way forward. We need to sit, discuss, and formulate ways. And like Dr. Mishra mentioned, that we need to work at different levels and possibly bring all stakeholders together and find the way forward. But definitely, violence won't be the solution, neither in the short term nor in the long. Bring all stakeholders
on board. I think it's a very plausible solution. Dr. Agrawal, as we end the debate, we've seen many times, because I have again and again reiterated the term vicious cycle of violence, because we've seen this happen again and again. It's been communicated to the public that if you take law and order in your hands, there will be stringent punishment. Examples have come, laws have been made more stringent. That doesn't really seem to end the violence. And on top of it, every time an incident like this happens, doctors, nurses go on strikes, adding to the further agony of the patients, alienating them further. As a doctor, I'm sure you feel this conundrum really. it's what do you do? Really, it's the most cogent solution in your, according to you.
Lawmakers should also state action should be taken against those who are doing this and who are doing the violence, and they should be arrested immediately. This will put a fear in their mind that if we do anything wrong to the doctors, they will be put behind bars immediately. And with this, we can have a solution in the short term, not in the long term. In the long term, you have to improve. We have to improve our medical services. Only then this problem can end.
Right. Final
This
word to
is
you. Absolutely. So, final word to you, Dr. Rao. Dr. Rao, end of the day, everything really boils down to the attitude of the people, to this mentality of people. We've spoken through this episode about how it's going to take some time. It cannot be done over one media, telecast, or we've seen many campaigns in the past also. What really is the way to change this mentality? Is a fear of law, as is being suggested by most panelists, the most effective way, according to you? Or do you think there is other or some other way also to communicate this to people, better understand, a way to communicate, to even express their grief in a difficult moment without violence, sir?
Laws are there since a long time. Andhra Pradesh, they made a law in 2008, the first time, and many other states have followed it. Laws are very stringent, but the problem is the interference of the politicians and obstructing the culprit to be arrested. That is one of the problems, and they have no faith in the system. And another thing is people rushing out into the hospital with one patient, and we cannot even accommodate them, or they will be hindering our treatment, and they will be making a lot of nuisance. All those things, that mob mentality has to be. We have to hold some community meetings. It is the responsibility of the community, which ward or the section of that people that are coming. We have to hold some meetings with the corporator or somebody, and they have to mend them. They have to mend them. The law will not do anything unless the leader of that community has to teach them something. And another thing, of course, the communication skills, and another is the improving of the infrastructure. This will definitely save the doctors, saving the doctor, because the doctor is a very precious person. After his degree, he is working about 15 years on post-graduation and sacrificing so many nights and lives.
And absolutely, the least we can do is respect the doctors. The least we can do is not vandalize hospital property, and of course not assault those people who save our lives. I think that's a very positive note to end this episode.
That has to come through the community.
Well, absolutely. So that's a very positive note to end this episode. It's been a rather riveting conversation in a positive and constructive direction. I hope some policymakers are listening, and I hope, most importantly, the public is listening. Taking the law in your hand, not acceptable. End of the day, a change in mentality is needed. We've brainstormed on how to do it. I hope it is implemented on ground in the near future. For now, I thank all my panelists. A rather riveting conversation. Thank you for taking out the time for speaking to us.
Thanks for calling us.
Thank you, everyone.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.